Holiday for adults. A few years ago, my husband and I vacationed in Jamaica at an all-inclusive adult resort. It was our first time at an adult resort, and honestly, I didn't know what to expect. My husband and I are not experimenters, and I was a little concerned about what the adult part of the resort meant. All I wanted was to spend a relaxing, warm week on the beach with my husband and a good book. When we arrived, I was relieved to see that there were no couples making love everywhere. What excited me most was that the beautiful pools were not polluted by screaming children. Yes, this was going to be a quiet and peaceful vacation. The beaches were beautiful, and tops were optional, as my husband was quick to point out. I've always been shy, so that first day at the beach, I refused to take off my top, despite my husband's nagging. Of course, he seemed to be enjoying the views while I sat in the sun and read a book. On the second day, I gave in to my husband's childish pestering and agreed to take off my top only if we moved to a more private place. He agreed, but as the afternoon wore on, more couples arrived and the place became less private. By this time, I had resigned myself to going topless, and for the rest of the week, it wasn't a problem. Besides, I wasn't running around the water's edge topless, I was just sitting and reading a book. I know my husband has had Baywatch fantasies, but this was not about me. Everything was going well until the fourth night, when my husband and I had a big fight. All week he had been ogling women on the beach, and it was starting to annoy me. That night, we went to a nightclub at the resort, and he started getting drunk and flirting with any woman he could get his hands on. One young hot brunette in particular caught his attention both at the club and on the beach. She was with an older man, and my husband made it very clear that he liked her. I knew he was drunk, but that still didn't excuse his behavior. I felt disrespected and hurt. It made me think about how he should behave on business trips. I know he cheats on business trips, and it has always been a sore subject for me. If this is how he behaved when I was with him, I can't imagine what he's like when he's alone. I tried to contain my anger as I didn't want to ruin our vacation, but it came out when we got back to the room. My volatile side came out at him and he got an earful. I was furious. Of course, he ignored me in response and drunkenly passed out on the bed, which pissed me off even more. I couldn't even look at him. I was so pissed off. It was already 2 a.m, and I knew I wouldn't be able to sleep as I was still very upset. I needed to calm down and relax so I could get some sleep tonight. A soak in one of the hot tubs was just what I needed. The resort was gated and very safe, so I felt comfortable leaving the room, even if it was very late. I changed into my swimsuit and blanket, grabbed a book, and headed for the hot tub. The night was beautiful, warm, and calm. The hot tub area was dimly lit and deserted. I removed the cover from my swimsuit and immersed myself in the warm, relaxing water. Enjoying the tranquility of this quiet night, I quickly immersed myself in a book. I had already lost track of time when I was brought out of my peaceful trance by a deep male voice behind me. "It's a beautiful night, isn't it?" He startled me, and I turned around sharply to see who it was. "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to scare you," he said. My eyes focused, and there stood the couple from the club. Oh, great, just what I needed. A young, hot trophy wife who would remind me of my lustful, cheating husband. The man was over 6 feet tall and had a mature and successful appearance. He looked to be in his late 50s, looked trim, and his rather attractive face showed the day's growth. He was wearing swimming shorts and a tight t-shirt that emphasized his muscular chest. I noticed that he was holding a bottle of rum and 2 glasses. "Oh no, it's okay. Yeah, it's a nice evening," I mumbled, surprised to see someone at this time of day. "Is it okay if we get inside?" He gestured to set his bottle and glasses on the edge of the tub, then pulled off his shirt before I could answer. He took his wife's hand as she removed her bikini cover and helped her into the hot tub. She looked like a Sports Illustrated model, tall, without a single trace of fat, with a figure to die for. Plus, she was about 20 years younger than me, and her husband for that matter. To say I felt inadequate was an understatement. "Yeah, sure. I was just leaving anyway," I replied, feeling a little awkward in the hot tub with this sexy-looking couple. They probably didn't want me hanging around. They slid into the tub across from me. "Oh, it feels wonderful," she gasped. "Please don't leave because of us." The young woman spoke up, sensing my concern. I sat still, assessing the situation and pondering whether I should leave now or give them a few minutes. They were a very attractive couple and seemed quite pleasant. "I'm Frank, and this is my wife Michelle," he said. "April," I replied, nodding. "It's nice to meet you, April. I saw you and your husband at the club. Did you lose him?" She smiled. Her question caught me off guard. "I wish I knew. He passed out drunk in bed," I replied, grinning. We started chatting, and both of them seemed easy to talk to and with a good sense of humor. Suddenly, I was in no hurry to get back to my room. Frank poured me and his wife each a glass of rum. They both leaned on the bench and approached me. "Sure, why not?" "Thank you," I replied as he handed me the drink. I couldn't help but think about how ironic it was that I was enjoying this evening with a woman my husband had a crush on. He was right to get drunk and pass out. The thought that my husband would have killed himself for sitting in a hotbed with Michelle made the whole situation even sweeter. Before I knew it, I was between them. Soon the conversation turned to sexual topics, and I played along. Almost simultaneously, Michelle and Frank placed a hand on each of my thighs under the water. As their hands moved up and down my legs, I fell silent and found myself emitting a sigh of approval. Wow, this isn't going the way I think it's going, is it? Michelle leaned in and gave my lips a surprisingly soft and passionate kiss. I immediately responded and wrapped my arms around her. While we were kissing, Frank leaned over and carelessly unbuttoned both tops. Michelle gladly helped me remove my top, and I did the same to her. I offered no resistance. Michelle and I explored each other's bodies in the warm water as if in a soothing embrace. I ran my hands down her back, exploring the curves of her body, and then gently kissed her neck. She let out a soft moan as I kissed her, and I felt my pulse quicken as I felt her soft, young skin against mine. Frank sat watching us, his face lit up with pleasure as he watched us entwined in the hot tub. Our naked forms rubbed against each other, and it felt wonderful. I could feel his presence as an energy between us, and it only added to the intensity and passion between Michelle and me. Michelle moved her hands over my form, caressing my skin, while her lips explored my neck. I felt my body quiver with pleasure as her hands traveled lower to my bikini bottoms. Our bodies moved in perfect harmony, and I felt the heat between us intensify as we explored each other. It wasn't long before Michelle brought me to climax. She knew exactly how and where to rub me. Her fingers worked feverishly as I came closer and closer to the end point. I let out a loud, deep moan as Frank leaned in and pushed me to the limit, stimulating my hard, erect ears. Frank moved closer, and soon our three bodies were entwined in a passionate embrace. We moved together in a passionate and intense rhythm, the heat of the water and the passion between us, creating a perfect storm of pleasure. Michelle slowly pulled away and sat across from Frank and me in the hot tub. She sat there smiling and sipping rum and watched as my husband and I kissed. I was shocked at my behavior, but I didn't want it to end. "Stand up. Let's look at your sweet little legs," he asked me. He stood up, reached out and pulled me out of the water by my arms. He held my arms up, leaning back to get a better look. He commented that I had such a nice body and that it was obvious that I exercised. How nice of him to say that when he was clearly married to such a gorgeous woman. At that moment, I realized that I had completely lost control of the situation. After getting tipsy, he helped me sit back down. I felt his forearm touch my chest as he maneuvered, so I ended up sitting on his lap. The alcohol made me dizzy and I giggled like a lovesick teenage girl. I wrapped my arms around his neck to steady myself, then kissed him. I could feel his device growing, and I rubbed my hips against him as I continued kissing. My breasts became hard and rubbed against his muscular chest. His hands moved from my waist to my breasts and squeezed them. Damn, that felt so good. God, his device felt huge, pressing against my heel. Instead of crying out, I moaned with pleasure. Then came the panic. "We have to stop this. I'm married." It really mattered to me, but I felt I had to say it. I'm not even sure why I said it. I was sitting topless on his lap in the middle of the night, him pawing at my form, and I was getting on his device while his wife watched. Yeah, I was out of line. Frank just smiled at me, and I laughed, realizing how ridiculous that sounded. Then he stood up and took off his swim trunks. His hard device popped out right in front of my face. His device was large, I suppose in proportion to his large size. It wasn't unusually long, but it was thick, very thick. Michelle moved over to her husband and took him firmly by the device. She started stroking him, and I watched enviously. She quickly started caressing him, and after a few good strokes, she invited me to join her. I joined her without hesitation. In a flash, Michelle pulled back, and Frank moved between my legs, and as he wrapped his arms around me, I felt his device against me. "Point it inside," he ordered. I hesitated, thinking, do I really want to do this? Does Michelle mind? What the hell am I doing? "Now," he barked in a stern voice. I looked at Michelle and she smiled approvingly at me. I reached down and I unfortunately had to cut out some of the story so YouTube would miss it. But you can join our exclusive community on Patreon and watch the full version. Now let's continue. We held each other for what seemed like hours, our bodies entwined in a passionate embrace. The sensations were so intense that it was as if I had been transported to another world. Eventually, we all went back to our rooms, and both Frank and Michelle kissed me tenderly goodbye. Lying in bed that night, I felt my body tingling with pleasure and mentally replayed the events of that evening. I had never experienced such pleasure before, and I knew it was an experience I would never forget. The next day, I woke up feeling both content and exhausted. I felt peace and contentment. The anger and rage I had felt the night before were gone. That morning at breakfast, Michelle and Frank walked by our table and greeted me warmly. The look on my confused husband's face was priceless. "How do you know them?" he inquired. "Just some friends I met while you were drinking last night." I refused to tell him anything else. Why should I? Tonight, we delved into the fascinating world of an adult resort in Jamaica, where our main character, April, found herself caught up in a whirlwind of emotions and desires. As the night progressed, it took unexpected twists and turns, leading April into a world of experiences she never thought possible. By the way, I remind you that the uncensored version is already available from us at Patreon. Now let's take a deeper look at the psychological aspects of this fascinating story. April's vacation, meant for rest and tranquility, took an unexpected turn into the realm of passion and exploration. Her initial doubts about the adult part of the resort were replaced by a chain of events that challenged her boundaries and threw her into uncharted territories. The conflict between April and her husband peaked on the fourth night, revealing hidden issues and insecurities in their relationship. This conflict was a turning point, sending April into a spontaneous encounter with a couple, Frank and Michelle, who were the catalysts for a night of unexpected pleasure and release. The encounter not only provided a physical escape, but also served as a temporary emotional release for April. Boundaries blurred, and she found herself in an experience that brought a mixture of ecstasy, confusion, and newfound peace. The complexity of emotions in this story reflects the complex dynamics of human desire and relationships. April's decision to withhold details from her husband introduces an element of mystery, adding another layer to the psychological implications of this unusual vacation episode. Reflecting on this story, questions emerge about the nature of human desire, the impact of spontaneity on relationships, and the delicate balance between emotional boundaries and the pursuit of personal fulfillment. April's story serves as a reminder that life often takes unexpected turns, and sometimes, in our eagerness to escape, we discover things about ourselves that we didn't know before. For those who want to explore the full, uncensored version of this April story, you can join our exclusive community on Patreon. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification to stay up to date on the latest adventures of our storytelling.